this morning for a little bit of humor. They're called the facts of life, but one of them says, time may be a great healer, but it's a lousy beautician. Remember, amateurs built the Ark. Professionals built the Titanic. Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just stand there. Okay? You're getting old when you get the same sensation from a rocking chair that you used to get from a roller coaster. Oh, getting into the old jokes. It's frustrating when you know all the answers, but no one bothers to ask you the question. Okay, I thought that fit the kind of the theme of bad dad jokes. Oh. So we're going to continue in this series called Experiencing God's Power and Presence. I opened it up a couple weeks ago by just saying that I'm trying to drag you through a personal journey that I'm on. That I just sense God calling me into a greater understanding and a greater experience of His presence and power. That maybe God has more for me. Maybe God has more for us that we're not finding. We're maybe resisting. We have matured into it. We don't have the understanding. We may have issues in our life to deal with. Maybe it's about being intentional and seeking what God desires for us. But what would it look like for us to experience a greater sense of God's presence and power? And so last week we talked about one of the ways this happens in what I called erosion. And I think I got a little, the dark represents kind of some earth there. And as the river of life flows through our life, the water has a tendency to erode away, and you see the one there, the like a hillside that's kind of been eroded away, and that God works in our life. He works in our heart. He works on our thoughts. He works on our motivation. He works on our purposes. He works on our desires. He erodes away certain things from our life, from our flesh, ourselves, and He changes us over time. He changes the fabric of who we are and makes us into what He wants and how He can use us. Now, today I want to talk about an idea, we'll call this one earthquake. And you've probably all experienced, anybody not experienced an earthquake? Who has experienced an earthquake? Who has? If you've experienced an earthquake, okay, you've been in an earthquake. Yeah. You were in San Francisco? Oh my goodness, in '89. The big quake down in San Francisco. We lived down in the LA area for a while, so we experienced a couple of big earthquakes and smaller aftershocks and all that. Because at those times in life when the very ground upon which you walk begins to shake, right? And we've gone through those. And it's then that we need God to intervene, to come in, to provide, to protect, and to care for us. What I'm really talking about is the kind of faith that helps us stand amidst the storm. The kind of faith that carries us through. The kind of strength from the Lord to know that He's with us, guiding, He's helping, He's going to get us through it. And that we're going to be able to survive and come out of this and maybe even protect us so much, take us through in such a way that we're going to even see the power, that we're going to stand on the other side of the storm and say it was only God that got us through. It was only God that did this thing. It was only God that helped us make it through this earthquake of our life. Now, I've been wrestling with a question that is a part of this recent quest to seek out this new sense of God's presence and power. And here's the question. And I'm putting this in my context, so I'm going to use the word you because that's the way it was said. But in my head, I'm hearing me, and I invite you to do the same, to hear the word me. If you are doing ministry, and it can succeed whether God shows up or not. Is it really kingdom work? And I'll tell you why that question has been kind of rattling around in my head, and why it's kind of been plaguing me a bit, is because I kind of like it to live my life in a sense where I have everything figured out. I know that everything's going to work the way I want. I know which direction I'm going and headed. I know that we're going to have a worship service here today, and I know that we've got people in the right spots. We've got it organized. We know what songs we're going to sing. It's no secret. I'm writing out the sermons, the words to speak. I mean that there's a sense that I've got it all planned, and we can go through all the pieces. And does God really need to show up at all? Because maybe the music can sound good. Hopefully my jokes were a little bit funny. Hopefully everybody shows up and does their works. We don't lose any kids along the way. And it's been a good Sunday. And we can live thinking that we got it all figured out. It's all under control. It's all going just fine. I can handle this. But here's the thing. Control is an illusion, right? Now, I had a little fun looking into this idea. It's a psychological term, and I found it rather interesting. Psychologists somewhat hotly debate the theory, how it works, why it's important, and so on, and its impact on our lives and so on. But basically, the idea is that we are in control of our life and the outcome of our decisions. That's the idea of the illusion of control. Here's a little blurb from Wikipedia. It says, the illusion of control is a tendency for people to overestimate their ability to control events. For example, it occurs when someone feels a sense of control over outcomes that they are demonstrably do not influence. The effect was named by psychologist Ellen Langer and has been replicated in many different contexts. So in other words, it's that idea within us that we believe that if we make the right decisions, we do the right things, if we are being careful about our lives and about everything, that we have a certain sense of control over every aspect of our life. And they use the word overestimate our ability of control. Here's an example. We went to a Father's Day weekend barbecue yesterday. And drove up north for about an hour. Met at my sister-in-law's house and had a little barbecue there. And thinking about the trip, and while we were there, we were singing in the car. We're talking. We're looking at the scenery out the windows. We're enjoying the trip, and everything went fine. We got up there, had a good time. We got back. Everything was great. But what's to keep about 1 million things from going wrong? Because at any moment, a tire could blow on the car. Another car coming at me, we're heading at each other at 60 miles an hour, passing each other on the highway. What's to say that they don't lose control and come into my lane? I was on the motorcycle about a week ago, and I was down here on just at the end of Crestline, just going down the road, and all of a sudden this car veers over right in front of me in my lane, and probably wasn't more than maybe 100 feet in front of me, and I had to, ditch the bike off onto the shoulder, and I look up, and here's a teenage girl texting on her cell phone. An animal could run across the road. Somebody not looking could dart out in front of me. There are a million things that could go wrong, and we tend to live with this illusion that everything is normal and fine. Now, what's interesting, here's the interesting thing I found about it as I looked at it. From a scientific point of view, they believe that it's a vital function of our psyche that allows us to function. Because without it, we would live in constant fear. We would never take adventure or risk. All manners of phobia come into play. Phobias are kind of unrealistic fears about situations when you're just fine, but you don't feel that way. So it's kind of essential that we have a certain amount of an illusion of illusion of control to navigate life, to manage. Or otherwise we just couldn't function. But whereas there's the potential pitfalls are also inherent in this illusion of control. There are tendencies And they go on to say that psychological theorists have consistently emphasized the importance of perception of control over life's events. In other words, there is some denial here that we don't have control and that it's all an illusion, and that some of it is important and some of it's bad. So it helps us to function, but it maybe makes teenage boys do really dumb things with skateboards. It makes adults spend their money unwisely and think that they always have a flow coming in. It creates a variety of things. It even perpetuates certain addictions and so on that all come back to this issue. And so I would agree a lot with this idea that there's some need for this illusion to exist for us to function. And many times in our life, that's just how we get through the day. We don't want to live in fear. But there are many times in life, too, when we're kind of given a peek behind the curtain of control. And we see that chaos and calamity are lurking behind every turn. And it's in those times that we have a choice. Do I just close the curtain, put up my blinders, determine that harder work, getting smarter, doubling my efforts, just hanging on, pretending that everything is normal and going to be fine and go back to the way it was, that if I just keep going, I can fix it, I just need to soldier on? Or is it in those moments that we admit that control is an illusion and we must cry out to the one that truly has the control? That we cry out to God and we say, help me, Father. I need you now. My earth is shaking, and you're the only one that can get me through. The Bible proclaims, this is the great paradox of faith, that when I am weak, then I am strong. When I admit my need, when I recognize my need, when I see that I'm out of control, that life is out of control, and I reach out to God and say, God, help me. You are the only way. You are the only one. You are my only hope of getting through. I want to take you to Exodus chapter 14 this morning. Fairly popular story of Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness. And we're going to read a little bit of this story. They have escaped through the trials that God brought upon Pharaoh and the Egyptians, through the curses, the wave after wave of problems that they experience, and finally Pharaoh lets them go and they leave. And so now God is leading Moses and the Israelites out of Egypt across the wilderness, and he's guiding them eventually towards the promised land, but they're just beginning the journey at this point. We'll begin in verse 1 and just read a little bit of this story. So then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say to the people of Israel, they are wandering in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. And I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his hosts. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. And they did so. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, what is this we have done that we have let Israel go from serving us? And so he made ready his chariot and took his armies with him, and took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the people of Israel, while the people of Israel were going out defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them, encamped at the sea by Pi-hahiroth and in front of Baal-zephon. And then Pharaoh drew near. The people of Israel lift up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? It's not that this, what we have said to you in Egypt, leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Boy, there's such a series in those two verses. Sometimes we would just rather die in slavery than trust in God. Boy, that should wake us up. That something in our flesh thinks it's better to be a slave to the world than to believe that God is for us. And we can trust him and follow him. Verse 13, Moses said to the people, "Fear not. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you." And here's their job in this process, in this their battle, their charges. The victory will be won if you have only to be silent. Moses seems to have led the Israelites into a trap. There are mountains all around them. Pharaoh and his army, and it seems to indicate all of his army. Every last chariot, soldier, and horse has been saddled and prepped and is chasing after them. Now the Red Sea is in front of them. Pharaoh's army is chasing them down. And God told Moses to go down into this area. They're given rather specific instructions as to where to encamp. Now, for us today, we don't know exactly the place that they crossed, and there's some debate about that. But these mountain ranges and these valleys and these areas would have been very clear to them. God gave them specific instructions about where to go, where to march, where to prepare and camp before they were to go on the next leg of the journey. And they're pinned in this valley area with mountains around them, the Red Sea before them. There's nowhere to go except how they got in there. And now all of the Egyptian army is upon them with weapons and war cries. And the Israelites had just spent the last 400 years having the slavery mentality beaten into them. And they were terrified for their life. And it makes sense. We understand why. This is a dire situation. And so God leads them down into this area, and God says, and this is why I'm doing this. I want Pharaoh to be confused. When he looks at this, he's going to think that you're wandering aimlessly in the land. Pharaoh's going to look at this, and he's going to believe that the wilderness has shut them in. So everything about this looks like a trap. It feels like a trap. It must be the salvation of God is what's going on. And God provides for them. We know the end of the story. God holds them off. He opens the Red Sea. They cross through on dry land, and he rescues them that day. Then when he allows the Egyptians to give chase, they go down into the waters, or into the same area, and the Red Sea closes upon them, and they all perish. And God saved them that day. They were in a situation where there was no hope. There was no rationale. It appeared that there was no order and organization. There was no plan. There was no strategy. There was nowhere for them to go unless God showed up. And we need to recognize that when we live our lives for God, that there needs to be the same sense within us. There's no hope. There's no way. This is not going to work unless God does what only God can do. And I was thinking about this. We're thinking, and I hate to just keep dragging on this. It's not the only thing going on, but we're just with a few weeks now of leaving for Kenya. And I think back of the last 2-year journey, and it's been so much work and preparation and getting ready to go. And now we're just kind of running into these boundaries and these barriers, and different things are starting to take place. And I just was having this overwhelming sense the other day that when you're really trusting God and you don't know how things are going to work out and you don't know what's going to happen, but you're just putting all your faith into one basket, all the eggs are in one place, that God, you've got to make this happen. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. To trust in the Lord, to see His hand move in your life is incredible. Yeah, just like the Israelites, it comes with some fear. It comes with some worry. It comes with some wondering. But when we put our trust totally in the Lord, we get to watch Him do amazing things, not because of us, but in spite of us. And their job that day was simply to stand and to be silent and watch what God was going to do. And so we see God's power invade our lives when we learn how to trust Him. When we recognize we don't have it all figured out, and we don't have it all understand, and we are working in ways and in areas that require more than what we have. God works in our life in a protective way, and He works in our life in an effective way. The protective way means that when the storms hit you, we need God's protection. When the storms come in, we need God to hold back the reins, to give us the shelter. We need His hands just to protect us in the midst of the storm. But we also need God's protection in effective ways. And when you see somebody else maybe entering into a storm, and we want to step in with the presence of God and say, we're here to bring relief and comfort to you. We want to affect your situation as we bring the presence of God into it. What does your ministry look like? Now, at first, we could think of it from our life's point of view. The life that we live. Do you have an overwhelming sense that if you can live your life without need of God, that you're probably not doing kingdom work? We should have that sense that just to get through my day, I need God's help, provision, and protection to make it, just to get through the day. And if I want to have any kind of kingdom influence in the world, we absolutely need God's protection and provision to be able to make it through the day. John 16:33 says, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. We're to have peace in Jesus. Why? He says, because here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. Is that not true? But take courage, he says, because I have overcome the world. So whatever we face, and whatever we're going through, and whatever challenges and sorrows come our way, we trust in Jesus to carry us through. And we seek Him and we walk with Him. And we trust that in His power, He can do things if we would stand with Him. When you stand, He'll provide courage. He'll provide strength. He'll provide wisdom and help you through. Whether it's for your storm or you're guiding somebody else through their storm, God wants to work in you. And so what does it look like? Where are your areas of ministry? Are you perhaps stuck? Are you perhaps not stepping into an area of ministry because you're afraid that you aren't enough and you don't have what it takes to serve God? Well, join the club. Join the rest of us. Get on the same bandwagon, because anybody that steps into true godly leadership recognizes we don't have what it takes. It's just that God has called us to serve Him, and all we're doing is saying, okay, God, I'll just follow you, and you're going to have to do pretty much everything else. And it kind of seems like God says, okay, that's the kind of deal that I'm offering. Just follow. I mean, those Israelites were saying, man, this Moses guy is nuts. I don't think he knows where he's going. I don't think he's got a clue. Moses is saying, hey, I'm just going where God told me to go. That's all I know. And we'll just see what he does. Might be a short trip. At the moment, it doesn't look so good. But God provided. And God has provided for me in so many ways over the years. And I've just come to realize this again and again and again. And unfortunately, it's a truism that I have to kind of learn over and over and over of how God takes care of, how God provides, how God does. When I finally get to the end of myself and say, God, please take over. There have been so many times I've sat in an office or over coffee and I'm talking with somebody and they begin to tell me their issue, their story, their problem, their pain. And I'm sitting there and I'm barely listening because what I'm doing in my head is I'm praying, God, if you don't show up, if the words come out of my mouth are mine, this thing's going to be a disaster. If you don't give me the right words to say, this is going to be awful. I remember raising money for teenagers to go off to convention, and we've got tickets and plans. It's kind of been this way with Kenya. We started to make plans and getting money together, and there were times when I was looking at the need that we had and the money we had, but the need that was still left, and I'm sitting there praying, God, if you don't suddenly make a couple of $1,000 show up on my desk in the next 48 hours, we're walking. And the answer would come. Planning events, and I'm thinking, God, if you don't bring volunteers, if you don't help out with some organization, if you don't show the support soon, this outreach is going to be a catastrophe. And everything goes just fine. God, I need wisdom because I don't know what to do. God, fix this problem because there is no way that I can fix it. God, there is pain going on, and I need you to heal it. God, we're lost in the wilderness, and I need you to show the way. God, please forgive me because I've offended you and I've wronged you again. God, I know that you're here, and I need you now. When we finally get to the place where we pray those kinds of prayers, crying out to God, God, this is a situation, this is what's going on, and there is no hope unless you show up and provide the way. And we listen, and we seek, and we hear, and we try to discern what he's saying. And then God shows us the direction we need to take. How do you like to live your life? I mean, if you're like any other person on the planet, I'm sure you like to have a certain plan, a certain comfort, a certain sense that life is predictable and okay. A certain sense that life's going the way that you hoped it would. And then you've hit those storms. You've hit those times. You've hit those trials. How do you handle that? Do you seek the power of God to invade your life and to bring you through? Or do you put up the fight? Do you just, think that if you work harder or are smarter or, do more, that's the answer? Do you have a sense that you don't need God? You kind of like to be in charge of things yourself? We need to recognize there's a tendency within us to do life that way. And not that we don't work hard, not that we don't do all these things. Of course we do. That's why we're here and we're worshiping. We want to learn the scriptures. We want to see God's voice speaking to us through everything that he says. And we give ourselves over to him. It's a lot of work to follow the Lord. The Israelites, they had to leave Egypt. They had to pack up and move on, and they had to wander in the wilderness, and that wasn't an easy journey. So they had to put their faith into action. But they had to learn how to trust in God along the way. And it's something we have to learn over and over and over. What does it look like for you to trust the Lord today?